Welcome to the Mischief. I'm Valen, and this is Embers Rekindled. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can refine your machinery to be a bit more efficient, and how you can mass produce all sorts of new materials. Alright, let's start off with something that you've had access to for some time. A mini boiler. The mini boiler is made simply with copper ingot and a bunch of iron plates. You just need to have had access to a stamper and some iron, and you're pretty much set to actually make one of these. Not necessarily ready to use them though, because you will need to have access to a Wildfire Stirling. These are made with a bunch of dawnstone and copper, plus one of those wildfire cores that you will have had to have accessed with your laser beams and disintegration rays. That being said, you can use your Wildfire Stirling to make things a bit more efficient. If you reference your ancient codex, it'll talk to you about the uses of this and how it can reduce the costs of any kind of machinery that it's plugged into by 50%. And then you can add a second one and reduce it to 25%. But if you use too many of these mechanical cores, or you start using more Wildfire Stirlings beyond 2, then things won't exactly work properly. Plus, if you use a mini boiler in a way that is, well, not preferred, it may end up exploding. So you will have to experiment a little bit in order to find out what is the best method for you. Now in this case, I have some fluid being pumped up into this fluid vessel here. It is then going underground, coming up and being fed into the mechanical core over here as part of a pressure refinery setup. Now what you need to do is basically have a mini boiler hooked up to some kind of, well, machine that either processes or uses ember. And that heat from it will then take the water that it may have and start turning it into steam, thus producing what you need for a Wildfire Stirling to function properly, as you can see here. But you'll have to be careful. If you have too much coming into it all at once, things can get a little bit chaotic and could explode. So you might just want to be a bit cautious about that. Not that anything else is going to be lost besides the boiler itself, but yeah, you may have to experiment a little bit and make sure that you have things set up properly. Either way, having some steam being fed to your Wildfire Stirling will definitely make things a lot more efficient. Now, speaking of efficiency, instead of mining, why not just have your materials produced for you non-stop? That's where these crystal seeds that you may or may not have found out in the world in some of those little underground structures that I showed you in the very first video. You may or may not find some of these out in the world. They may have different level ratings on them, little bits kind of encircling them as well. All that basically means is those little things that are orbiting these crystal seeds is that those represent nuggets that are about ready to come out, but they need to actually have an injector hooked up to them in order for those to be harvested properly. As you can see here, these bits are kind of popping off of there. So what you'll need is some kind of crystal seed. Now, quite often you might find these in the world. You can mine these and then bring them back to your base. Alternately, you can actually harvest them where they're at and take advantage of the advanced level that they may be. Otherwise, eventually you will level them up as you use them. So once you've mined up one of these crystal seeds, you'll then get something like this. Placing it in the world, it looks rather, well, boring, mundane, and ineffective perhaps. You'll want to use an ember injector with it. An ember injector uses some dawnstone, wildfire cores, silver, and a bit of caminite. Then you just need to have something facing it, and then from that you'll need to have ember going into those ember injectors. In this case, I have a bunch of funnels collecting a whole bunch from other producing methods. And as the ember is being injected into it, because as you can see here, it's just going straight into the ember injector, it will then start increasing its level as the refinement goes up. The higher the level, the more it will produce. Now keep in mind though that you will get quite a bit of these, so you're going to want to have a lot of space. I currently am using a item vacuum over here hooked up to just 3 chests, and it's got more than enough in here to start overflowing into a second double or third double chest that are currently filling up quite rapidly from this setup. Now I have one of each of these in place here, but you'll notice that not everything will actually be recovered. That's because aluminum is not actually used by any of the other mods I currently have installed. As an example, I have 6 different materials that are standard, and it also has a few extras in case you have some other mods that might use those different metals. But that's a fantastic use of a lot of ember, is to just constantly turn it into materials that you could use for building projects, all sorts of different mod packs, etc. Now with those out of the way, let's cover the very last items that I'm going to be covering in this series, and that is the catalyst chamber, the combustion chamber, and the Ignem reactor. Catalyst chamber requires a mechanical core, a bunch of silver parts, and one of those ember crystal clusters you will have had to have, disintegrated some items to obtain. A combustion chamber requires copper, a mechanical core, and another one of those crystal clusters as well. And then the Ignem reactor is a bunch of copper, silver, caminite, and of course a wildfire core. Using the Just Enough Items mod, or JEI, I can hit the U key and find out the different items that the catalyst and combustion chambers can use. In this case, the catalyst chamber will use the ember grit that you may or may not have tons of left over. Also, it has a use for gunpowder or glowstone, as you'd like, for increased multipliers. Now what does this do? If you look at the top of this, it looks very similar to another type of item, that being a pressure refinery or other similar ember producing, ember energy to be more specific. And these are just the top part of it. It doesn't have the bottom part. So you can also add on extra machinery if you need to, but you will need to have had placed down one of these catalyst chambers, then one of these combustion chambers, and then between them you'll have to have put this Ignem reactor. That being said, remember each one of these can get fed in stuff and it can multiply your output. So in this case I have ember grit. I also have a whole bunch of ember grit being funneled off from my ember bore down here. If you look, I've got quite a few stacks that have just been accumulating. I have no real use for them. I've been using maybe 1 or 2 in some of my beam gun setups, but this is definitely going to be used in this setup to create even more ember. Now on the other side of it, I am just using some charcoal. Yes, you can use some other things. Using the JEI mod again, the combustion chamber can be used with charcoal or coal for a 2x modifier, nether brick for 3x, and blaze powder for 4x. I'm just going for the simple solution, charcoal. Combining those together, I have some in here. I can just flick this lever. It then starts getting fed into this. Same thing with this side. I will feed this in just a little bit, not too much, and I have a little bit left over. And then in the top, you'll notice if I take an ember dial and place it here, that it has no ember currently in it. If I go up to the top and I place 1 ember shard in there, you can then see it then produces quite a bit, which then instantly ended up getting transported out into the ember ejector, so I apologize for not having that already set, but it made 2,000 already, just from 1 little tiny ember shard, which normally using an ember activator will only make 4,000. So you can see it's getting a 5x multiplier, which it actually says so when I look at this ember dial as well. It has a 1x for it, plus 2 here and 2 here, for a total all being added together for a 5x multiplier. So it can really end up making your ember go a lot farther, especially if you're having some kind of bottlenecks. That being said, let's drop in a whole bunch more ember shards and we can start melting this up quite a bit more, producing a whole lot of ember rather quickly. Pulling this lever, I can then use this power as it's needed, because right now they're currently all full, but it will be also used to promote a bit more of my metal production. Now yes, you can use this setup with your boiler and so on, but I'm going to leave that to you to try and figure out, as I think I've completed what I set out to do here with giving you the basics on just about everything you're going to want to need to know about Embers Rekindled. So if you enjoyed this series and would like to see more, please be sure to give a like, comment, subscribe, come visit us on Twitch, and don't be afraid to leave a comment below letting me know some other mods that you'd like to see me cover. Till next time, folks, I'll see ya.